Hello everybody, my name is Mark McCormick. I'm the CEO of the UK-based charity Moldovan Mission. My family and I have been serving the Lord in the Republic of Moldova since 1994. The Lord enabled us to plant a couple of churches down in the south of the country as part of the Baptist Union, and then enabled us to pastor them and grow them. We did that for 20 years. But around about 2008, we began to work with one of the pastors that was in our county, a man that was just trying to start a church plant in his village. So began to work alongside him, mentoring and helping him in evangelism, finding support so he could stay in the ministry. And that's when our church planting ministry with other partners began. Now, he's been at that since then. He's planted 3 churches. There are 2 new works started. The Lord is just taking him on. But from then onwards, we began to find other partners. And now we are in partnership with 10 church planters right throughout Moldova. Now, the method of evangelism that we use together is a thing called Project VRANC. It helps us grow the mother churches, but also helps us start new works. VRANC is an acronym. It stands for our unsaved friends. The R is for our unsaved relatives. Then associates, neighbours and kids. Associates are people that we work with, not friends, but people we know casually. And that's an acronym that we use for this ministry. Now, we look at the project. In fact, this series of videos is about Project VRANC. But I just want to share, over the years, when I've been preaching in my own church or even in other churches, quite often people would come to me after the message and they would say, "Brother Mark, how can I find the will of God for my life?" That's happened more than once. And usually I would direct them to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3, that says, "This is the will of God for your life, your sanctification." So I would explain to them, look, you need to receive Christ into your life and then yield to his leading in your life, and he will live his life out through you. That's sanctification, becoming like Christ. And they would say to me, "Yes, Brother Mark, I'm trying the best I can to be like Christ, but I want to know what the will of God is for me serving him." And then this is where I would bring them to some scriptures, some things that Jesus said just before he ascended into heaven, and they are his instructions for his disciples, not just then, but right throughout history. And these instructions are often called by theologians the Great Commission, the great job that Jesus has given us to do. Now, you will find Jesus quoted in all 4 Gospels speaking about the Great Commission, and then also in Acts. So what I've done here is I've got the verses together and sort of banded them together and then narrowed them down to just 6 action verbs. And those 6 action verbs would be go. Jesus tells us to go out. He says, don't stay at home and wait for the unbelievers to come to you. You need to go out to them. And then witness. That means sharing how Jesus saved you to the unsaved. And then preach the gospel or share the gospel, impart the gospel message to people who aren't saved so they understand how to get saved. And then make disciples, which would be leading them to Christ and establishing them in Christ, and then baptizing them. And then finally he says, teach them to obey all that I've commanded you. So that's the growing process. That's the sanctification process. So these are the commands that Jesus gave all his disciples to do. And all his disciples should be involved in this. Now, if you're a pastor looking at these videos, or perhaps the one that's responsible for evangelism in your church, my guess is that you're already doing these things. You're already involved in evangelism, sharing the gospel and so forth. So most of the material in these sets of videos won't be that relevant to you. You know it already. But the main point of these teachings on this VRANC project is for the rest of the members in the church, the ones who aren't involved in the Great Commission. And you will find, I'm sure you know this, that there will be some of your members that just don't want to do it. They're stubborn, they're selfish, they're lazy. But the vast majority of the members in your church, they want to do this, but they have been so discouraged by past failures, they're not doing it. fears of failure, fears of not being able to share the gospel properly, and many, many other things, has quenched them from actually being involved in this Great Commission work. It's overwhelming for ordinary believers. And this Frank course has been developed to help the ordinary believers still play a part in this Great Commission. Now, I want to ask you a question. If you're one of the leaders listening to this series of videos, or perhaps you're just an individual listening to this, here's a question I want you to ask you. What hinders you from effectively sharing the gospel with an unsaved person? Now, if you're one of the leaders here and you have the members with you, what I want to ask you to do is split them into groups. Switch the video off for a few minutes, split them all into groups, appoint scribes for each group, and then discuss this question. What hinders you from effectively sharing the gospel with an unsaved person? And the scribe will write down all the reasons that's shared in the group. And then perhaps after that, you have a few minutes just sharing with each other from different groups the things that you wrote down, and then you can come back to the video in a moment or two. And if you're doing this on your own at home, do the same thing. Put the video on pause, take a piece of paper, write down the things that make it difficult for you to share the gospel. Okay, do that now. Okay, did you do that? What kind of answers came up in your group time? I do this ministry in many, many different churches in many different countries, actually, and we ask the same question. And these are some of the answers that come back when I put the question to believers. Here's the first top answer every time, that comes out every time. The reason why that hinders them from sharing the gospel effectively with an unbeliever is fear. Was that the same in your groups? That was the top answer. Yep. Fear that my contact will get offended, fear that I will be rejected, fear that I will destroy the relationship, fear that I will mess up the sharing, fear that I will feel embarrassed or they do. All these kind of things are fears that stop us sharing the gospel, especially if we've done it before, not really led by God. We've done it in the flesh, made a mess. We are so discouraged and we never want to do it again. And that's what happens to so many believers. So here's some more things that come out when we do these surveys. I don't know how to share the gospel clearly. That comes up often. I don't know how to answer awkward questions. I don't know how to lead someone to Christ. This is not my gift. That's one that comes up all the time. In fact, I often say this when I'm talking to people who say it's not my gift. Imagine you're walking down the street and there's been a car accident and there's somebody lying on the street there bleeding to death. What do? You look at that person and say, well, I'm not a doctor. This is not my gift. And you walk on past them and leave them to die? I don't think so. Even when it's not your gift, you do what you can. The very least you would do, you would ring, you would get onto an ambulance. And kind of the equivalent for us as believers, the very least we can do is pray. Get on to God. Get on the phone to God. You would not walk past someone dying saying, this is not my gift. So in the same way, don't let the devil do this to you, to say, this is not my gift, therefore I shouldn't be involved. Okay? Another thing would be, I don't think God can use me in this. Again, the devil's very good at that, convincing that we're just no use to God. Not just in this, but in almost anything. This is what he'll do because we are a threat to the devil if we start doing what God tells us to do. Here's another thing. I don't want to have to develop a relationship with someone I don't know. Now that's very challenging. If God opens up the door to one of your Franks, the thing that you will need to do is develop a relationship with them. And people say, well, I don't want to for somebody who's new. That's a challenge. Really, we need to go to God about that because that's just love, not really caring for someone who's unsaved and going to hell. And then one time in one of these courses that I did, somebody replied with this answer, laziness. I'm just too lazy to do it. So at least he was honest. I don't know what you do about that. Now, can you see, and I'm talking to those of you who are leaders here particularly, can you see that your church is full of genuine believers who want to do this because in their hearts they know they should do it. God has saved them and they're going to heaven, and they don't want to see other people die and go to hell. They're genuine, they want to do it, but they're not doing it because of fear. The devil has managed to quench them and keep them under that because of fear. Now, the encouraging thing about this course, it's an evangelism and discipleship course where the believers do not have to evangelize. Let me say that again, because people don't pick it up the first time, and even the second time they don't believe me. This is an evangelism and discipleship course where you do not have to evangelize. All you have to do is pray diligently. We'll talk about that in one of the coming lectures. You need to pray. You need to ask God to open up a door with your Franks so you can befriend them, and then invite them to an outreach meeting later on in the year. You need to do those three things: pray, befriend, and invite. You don't have to evangelize. Now, when the believers honestly realize they do not have to evangelize, this takes away all the fears. You just have to pray, befriend, and invite your Franks to the outreach meetings. Now, there are three parts to this course: the before, the during, and the after. So the before is the things that we need to do in preparation for the week of mission later on in the year. The during is the week of mission itself, how we do these Frank groups. And after is when people have responded or shown an interest, we want to bring them into a discipleship course and bring them through to a clear new birth and to be established in Christ. So there's a before, during, and after. The before has 4 talks on how we can effectively pray for, befriend, and invite our Franks to the outreach meetings that will be later on in the year. The during is how to prepare for and do the outreach meetings, and the after is this New Believers Discipleship course. Okay, are you feeling encouraged? I hope you are. I hope as a leader, or even an individual if you're reading this, I hope you're feeling encouraged that there's some hope that you and your believers might be used by the Lord in this Great Commission. If they start to feel, I don't have to evangelize here, and the fears start to depart, then they will be joyfully wanting to be involved in this. And that's encouraging. This is what we want. This project is about getting the whole church involved. I was just involved with a church recently, and the pastor, such a lovely, humble man, was saying, for the last 10 years, we haven't seen anybody saved out of the world. Some of the children from their families in the church have got baptized, but nobody out of the world. And they took on this project, and all of the members, apart from 2, are involved in it. And for all of them, this has been nervous. They haven't done it before. They didn't know how to get involved, but God is moving. Because they brought their, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and God is moving with what they've offered, and they're seeing results and getting excited about it. Okay, so the next video is the first in the 4 talks of the before section, and its title is Who We Are in Christ for our Franks.